Life at sea has a way of emptying your mind. The horizon never changes. The waves repeat themselves. The engine hum becomes a background heartbeat. For sailors, days blur together until time itself feels suspended between water and sky. And then sometimes the ocean decides to break the routine. 10 miles off the coast of Sri Lanka, a naval patrol vessel moved steadily across calm water. The sky was dim, not yet dark, not fully bright, that quiet hour when the sea feels almost peaceful. The mission was ordinary. Scan the waters, watch for smugglers, keep an eye out for stranded boats or drifting cargo. Nothing unusual. Until one officer narrowed his eyes. "There," he said quietly. At first it looked like debris, a large piece of driftwood perhaps, something washed away from shore. But it moved. Not like trash, not like waves. It shifted with intention. The crew adjusted course, curiosity slowly turning into confusion. As the ship approached, the shape became clearer, larger, stranger. And then the impossible revealed itself. It wasn't a log. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't any sea creature they recognized. It was an elephant. For a few seconds, no one spoke. An elephant, in the middle of the Indian Ocean. The men blinked as if their eyes were playing tricks on them. Elephants belonged in jungles, in grasslands, beside rivers, not here, surrounded by endless blue. But there he was, massive, gray, fighting. The crew quickly pieced together what must have happened. Somewhere inland, the animal had likely attempted to cross a lagoon, something elephants do naturally. But strong currents must have dragged him outward, farther and farther, until land disappeared behind him. Elephants are surprisingly strong swimmers. Their heavy bodies float naturally. Their trunks act like snorkels, rising above the surface to draw breath. But strength has limits, and this one was reaching his. The elephant's movements were slow, labored. Each breath sounded heavier than the last. His trunk rose above the water, then dipped lower, then rose again in desperate rhythm. He was exhausted. Time was no longer a luxury. The Navy officers knew something terrifying. Even the strongest animal cannot outswim the ocean forever. If they didn't act quickly, the sea would take him. But how do you rescue something that weighs several tons in open water? Their vessel wasn't built for this. They were trained for maritime threats, not elephant salvation. Still, leaving him wasn't an option. One officer grabbed the radio, requesting immediate backup. Wildlife specialists. Urgent. As the call went out across the water, the ship remained beside the struggling giant. Close enough to watch, close enough to see his eyes. And in those eyes, they saw something haunting. Not aggression, not fear, but fatigue. Pure, overwhelming exhaustion. They had found him just in time, or so they hoped. Backup arrived just before sunset. A second naval vessel cut through the water, carrying wildlife officers who understood elephants, their strength, their limits, their fragility when pushed too far. Bringing the elephant on board was impossible. He was simply too large, too heavy, too unpredictable. There was only one option. They would tow him. Carefully, slowly, with ropes secured around his massive body, the ships began the delicate process. The speed had to be perfect, fast enough to beat exhaustion, slow enough to let him keep his trunk above water. One mistake, and he would be dragged under. The engines hummed low, the ropes tightened, and the rescue began. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sea in shades of crimson and gold. But there was no beauty in the moment, only tension. Jumbo, as the crew had begun calling him, fought with everything he had left. His trunk pierced the surface for air, sometimes steady, sometimes faltering. At times, he sank lower. Too low. He would disappear beneath the waterline for a terrifying second, then surge upward again, spraying water from his trunk in desperate gasps. Each time, the sailors held their breath. Night crept in, darkness swallowed the ocean, spotlight switched on, slicing beams of white across black water. The exhausted elephant's outline shimmered in the artificial glow, massive, vulnerable, alive. Hours passed. No one spoke unless necessary. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was personal. Then finally, faint at first, the coastline appeared. The water shifted beneath them. The deep navy blue softened into green. The ocean floor began to rise. And something changed in Jumbo, as if he sensed it. His movements grew steadier, stronger. One final pull, then another. And suddenly his feet touched sand. The rope slackened as the elephant felt ground beneath him for the first time in hours. He stumbled forward, trembling, weak, but standing. The crew carefully released the lines. Slowly, painfully, Jumbo walked toward shallow water, toward the lagoon, toward life. Wildlife officers waited on shore, ready in case he collapsed. But he didn't. He paused once, lifted his trunk high into the night air, and for a brief second it felt like gratitude. Then he disappeared into the darkness of the trees. Silence returned to the sea. The officers stood there, watching the empty shoreline. They had faced storms, smugglers, danger, but nothing like this. One officer later said quietly, "If we hadn't been there at that exact moment, he wouldn't have survived the night." And somewhere in the forests of Sri Lanka, there is an elephant who once swam with the ocean and lived because a few sailors refused to look away. Because sometimes, even in the deepest waters, humanity wins.